Hey, Slick Talkers, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. And I know that if you love this show, you'll also love my morning show called Good Morning Hospitality with my co hosts Michael Golden and Brandy Canali, as we spend 30 minutes every Monday morning to dive into the industry's top latest news and trending topics. So go check it out on wherever you find your podcasts at Good Morning Hospitality. And you can live stream with us on Monday mornings on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode.
So the cleaner can think I'm just and so, I'm not going to be able to speak up or whatever it may be. But they can also think, to the office professional, they can say, well, you're just an office professional. You don't understand what I go through every day. And you know what? The office professional has their own sets of challenges, and there is no just on any side. Every role, every profession should be valued within the organization. And so, yeah, not a just, no just mentality.
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, Nathan, I see that you guys have added cigarette detection to the new Gen 3 device. And my question is, what's the difference between cigarette smoke and any other type of smoke?
Yeah, great question. We're so excited about this new feature. We launched it at the very end of May, and we've called it cigarette detection for a reason, right? So it's a machine learning feature, very intelligent, and it doesn't just detect all smoke. It's not a smoke alarm, but specifically cigarette smoke. So if someone's in your rental and they've burnt a piece of toast or created some other type of smoke, we won't bother you with an alert. But if we detect using our cigarette detection feature that they're smoking cigarettes, then we'll send you an alert. So, a great way to get alerts about the things you do care about while not getting alerts about the things that you don't.
All right, you heard it here first. Another minute with Minute, and now back to the episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. And this one's exciting because I have the one and only John Wick. You know, the big movie you've seen? I'm just kidding. We have Jonathan Wicks today, who is the founder of Well and Good. So, Jonathan, I'm excited to interview you. We got to meet at the first conference we actually hung out at, which was Level Up Your Listing in Scottsdale. And I got to learn a little bit about your business, and I was incredibly shocked and surprised because your business is not an easy one in our industry. But before I spill all the beans and the details, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing?
Well, thank you. I'm doing great. Yeah, the name thing, John Wick, is like kind of got the whole "don't mess with my dog" thing going on. So
I
yes,
yeah, I love it. I love it. Just at all costs.
my mom always made me go by Jonathan, and so she would never let me be named John until now the movie came out, and so people then naturally leaned towards that too. Yeah, but definitely was a good one. And I just wanted to give note to the conferences that we met at. I don't know anybody that's listening that's been to a conference where Will is attending. You've got to see his dance moves on post conference. The conference really doesn't start until there's music and Will is dancing. It's incredible. It's a sight to see. The skills are all off the chart.
Well, you think I should quit podcasting and go into dancing full time?
There's something there to it. There's something there. He's good.
Hey,
You're good, man.
if we go into a massive economic recession and crash, I know where I can rely on when it comes to making some money
The
one of
old
these days.
trusty, yeah, the old trusty moves. Sprinkler never let you down.
Never.
Yeah, I love
Well, enough about me and the dance moves
it.
that apparently you're not the first person to mention, so all my listeners are probably like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know Will could do that." So it's like, "Oh, you be careful. Know what you ask for."
Find a conference that Will is attending. Find a conference maybe even that he's emceeing because he's also good at that. But go there and then find out where you're going afterwards. Will, what's going on here? Is there any music? That's yeah. I would just. It's worth it.
Well, I gotta say, to compliment you, you're a man of style. We are two brothers that got to be wearing the same set of shoes at two conferences in a row.
You can't
That
make
was
that
fun.
up. I mean, you can't make that up. Walking in, we're like, "Oh, nice shoes," and then 6 months later, we're literally doing the same thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
so brothers
great
from
time.
another mother. Love it.
Yeah.
I have no
Cole
dance
Haan,
skills, though. I have no dance skills, so that's where that's where you lose me.
that's fine. People will be, like, looking at our feet and be like, "I thought I just saw you over there, but then I saw you on the dance floor." And it's like, "No." Shout out to Cole Haan for making good shoes that we were rocking at these conferences. Okay,
Potential
but
sponsorship
enough.
potential
Yeah,
sponsorship, Cole Haan,
yeah, I'll give you 15% of whatever they bring in, alright?
love
So,
it.
we'll be good. Alright, enough of us getting to goof off. This is about Jonathan and his company and his story, so I wanna really jump in, my friend, because I got to hear about your company, obviously, like we were just talking about through conferences, and I think, there's always this kind of, I don't know, conversation sexiness of people being like, "Oh, I have this tech company and or we have this many properties and this and this." But your business is so different because it is the unsexy of sexy in our industry where operations and turnover and all the other pieces, logistics that go into making sure a home is prepared and ready for guests. And you guys really take that on into a huge scale compared to what I've seen throughout the industry in multiple states and whatever you want to call it. So tell me one for the listener's sake, what your company does and who you service. And then two, let's start. Where did this all begin for you? I would love to hear kind of like the light bulb moment behind it.
Yeah. So I'll get into what we do. We are a servicing company within the short term rental space. So we provide full scale servicing for hosts, and that primarily consists of three things. It is that we complete the professional cleaning, we complete the offsite laundering, as well as the sourcing of hotel style linens. And then we do all of the guest essentials. We supply the guest essentials, we purchase them. We are making sure that the home is entirely guest ready with things like high level soaps, your paper products, your consumable items. The bundling of the cleaning, the linens, and the guest essentials is our core service. And we complete that for hosts of all types. So whether hosts that have a lot of homes or hosts that have one home, regardless, we are providing that service. And it's something we based it 3 years ago. We started out of Scottsdale, Arizona, and then now have expanded to different markets across the country. And really just trying to find the industry's biggest need and help with it was really the thought. And, getting into how it all happened, a lot of it was because I've loved the short term rental space for a long time. I was a guest and stayed, in tons of properties, and I love the upsides that it would provide. But also, I kind of just went into it knowing what a lot of people know is just the downsides. Probably going to be gross, and it's probably going to be somebody's old sheets, and you might have to go buy toilet paper, all these different things. And then I really saw it even more so from a host perspective. I had my own property. And so I started to look into, okay, how am I going to service this property? So I hire a residential cleaner, somebody who is, going in to do the cleaning portion. And I realized there was so much more. This was a house that had 10 beds in it. And we were trying to figure out the laundry. Do we try to do it there at the house? Do they take it offsite? Do they take my linens? How does that work when something's stained? And then how do we supply the house? Is it constant Amazon deliveries to the house or to maybe to the cleaner's house? And I just thought there should be a company that exists that specializes in the turnover services completely, not just providing a cleaner, but providing the things that the cleaner needs to be efficient and to actually be set up for success. And that company really didn't exist. And my background is in scaling service companies. And so I said, let's do this. This is an industry that I'm passionate about. And I really think this fills the big need of consumer confidence. And we can get into that later. But that's kind of the start of Well and Good is I saw the need from both the guest as well as the host perspective. And that led to the concept of a full scale servicing company.
Well, I would love to dive into that. As you're sharing that story, you said you had experiences in the past from scaling service companies. So what is your background? Like what type of, because this is obviously a hard challenge to solve in our industry. I can only imagine what other type of service businesses in other industries you've been a part of that are also very hard and logistic and
Yeah. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
cut my teeth. I cut my teeth, and with my first company I started when I was 19 years old. I was in college and I needed to be able to do something overnight. So I started a cleaning company when I was 19, and we did commercial cleaning. We did like the janitorial cleaning for restaurants, back of house overnights, cleaning the Buffalo Wild Wings, Red Robin, Red Lobsters, all of those. We would do the cleaning. And I had my college buddies that were able to help with that. And so I scaled that company in Northwest Indiana, and then ended up selling that company after college and going into working with bank-owned homes. So we were at a point where there was a lot of foreclosures. There was a lot of needs within the homes that were sitting empty to be serviced. So our company was completing things like the lock changes or the grass cuts or the small repairs that needed to happen for these homes. And it was, there are so many parallels to the industry, but basically at that time, there were a lot of foreclosures that had kind of come onto the market. There had been this overwhelming amount of volume that really had left a lot of operational issues within the industry. And we were able to bring in some transparency. We introduced the idea of photos to that industry and to start to show the work that we did working at a property that was owned by a bank. You could say, hey, we cut the grass, and if there was no proof of it, no one would know. And so then there was people taking advantage of others. And so we brought in some of that level of transparency, and that was my main core business, was working with those homes for the last 10 years. I purchased another company, and we ran both those companies until I sold the majority of that company in the end of 2019. And I was planning on being kind of away from entrepreneurship. I was not planning on starting something. And yeah, the bug got me. And I just saw the need in this industry and said, let's do it.
Wow. It's crazy that it's also like a cleaning company and a service company focus on all the other stuff in homes. Like you were still in the same industry, just in a different segment of it, right? Like primary
Well,
residence for secondary, third, right?
and all of them had to do with completing a service when there was generally not someone occupying the home. So
Mm.
whether that is an empty home of a bank owned, or it's an empty restaurant which needs to be turned over, or if it's a short-term rental between guests. And that requires a lot of trust. It requires a lot of transparency, a lot of documentation, efficient communication. And those things are really, when we look at what's needed in the short-term rental space, that's exactly it, is how
Yeah.
during that time, how can we document things better? How can we make sure that we're communicating during that really small window of time? And yeah, so those things definitely have parallels for sure within the different industries.
Well, and then, yeah, to go into the fact that when you get into the vacation rental sector, you don't have to figure this out and be like, "Oh, where do we start and how do we do this?" And like kind of run around with your head cut off. It sounds like, you kind of came in with some already, pre-existing tools, some pre-existing experience, pre-existing, just idea of know exactly where to tackle, which every single host, whether you're a one property host up to a 100 property vacation rental manager, you know, that's where we all usually start, is like, how the hell do we figure this out? And just like, we just run until we run out of juice. And then we're like, oh, there's systems and processes that we can use and check.
Yeah.
And this, like, yeah,
This industry is so full of throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks because there's not a manual, there's not a playbook for it. And I think there are some fundamental things that I was able to learn from the previous companies. One of them being that you have to and find everyone's biggest need and help them with it. And we knew that the servicers, the actual folks that were doing the work in the field, the cleaners in this instance within our industry, were really not set up for success often. And the best of them were actually not wanting to service short-term rentals because they didn't want to do the laundry or manage major inventory closets. They were professional cleaners. And I think that focusing on everybody's individual skill set is so huge. And we did that within the other industry. And it's so needed here because I think if we can set some core principles, which is that, we value the professionals that work in our organization and we want to set them up for success, which is the most selfish thing we could possibly do, because of course that's going to
yeah,
make a successful organization as a whole. But we get away from that a lot of times when we get into, just thinking all about numbers, and we lose the humanity aspect of business. And that's always been at the forefront of what I've done is, I love, oh my goodness, there we go. I love technology. I love the aspect of all those new ways, but this is still a people business, and service industries have to be.
100%. And yeah, the part that intrigues me the most, especially with your experience, where I'm like, I want to dig deeper under the last year or two or three, when you were 19 and you started, you're like, hey, I need to hustle and get through college. Do you think that was an initial reaction, obviously due to like the circumstance of being in college and trying to like make sure you pay your way through and whatnot? Or have you always kind of had a entrepreneurial bug or itch or curiosity? I know the question has been asked many times on this show to everyone or in other shows and podcasts and entrepreneur stuff is, were you born or made as an
Mhm.
entrepreneur? And I would love to know like your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I think nature or nurture, I do believe, everything in my life is an and mentality. And so I definitely would, I suppose everybody probably says that it's a bit of both, but I know that, my growing up led to a lot of the entrepreneurial path that I have now. My dad was a farmer. And with that, he was somebody who was always very much, you buy and you sell and you get gain and you do those kind of individual business things that we did. Growing up in a rural world does make, every farmer baling hay growing up. I was milking cows, baling hay, doing those kind of things that is like you instill a work ethic, first of all, but then seeing everybody and knowing that this is their world, this is their livelihood, and their livelihood is consistent of it's their business. It's small business personified within a small towns. And
Mm.
so I was able to see that. And we did the classic things, we had a pretty awesome lawn service, me and my brothers, when we were in high school. And that's like, I can't recommend that stuff enough. You cut teeth and you start to, I was always the PR person. So my brothers would always say, all right, you go to Betsy's door and collect the money and you're going to talk to her about all this stuff. We're going to cut the grass. Like, but you're talking to her, like you go collect the payments. And that was always my thing. And I would then, talk to her and see about her neighbor's yard getting cut, and classic things like that definitely set up for that. And then what really prompted it in college was I had a good job as a sales position within a large service company, a service master company, and great organization. But I did love that idea of the sale and, the aspect of that. But sometimes I felt like the operational back end wasn't always so great. So I'm like, well, I wanted to be more of a part of the holistic process rather than just the sale and then letting it go to wherever it goes. And so that's what led me to saying, like, I think I want to tackle this. And there's a freedom and there's all the things that make an entrepreneur. but I think that the foundation was laid early for those kind of things to be in place. Yeah.
Definitely. That makes so much sense. And it it's so funny because you have the and symbol on your shirt. You mentioned the and mentality. And this is one thing I had written down. I don't normally like do pre-screened questions before recording with someone, but before you jumped in, I was like, all right, why is it so significant for you? Is that personal, or is this just something that you've always just had at the forefront, getting into business? I would love to know.
It's so personal to both my own beliefs, but also what I believe we need in business. And, there's this mindset of if you look at the contrarian of what an and mindset would be, it'd be an or mindset. It would be that we either have to choose this path or that path. We either have to choose profitability or treating our people the right way, or we have to choose, the environment or doing a good job. And I am an and person because I think that the way to find win-win solutions, which is what our and is all about, is we're going to serve well and do good. And both of those things matter. And the win-win solutions come from human to human interactions. Most of the time, if you're looking for the compromise and you're looking for the wins, you can find them, but you have to lean into that as like a fundamental aspect of your life or your business or whatever. So we wanted to make it just be like all over. That is what we are looking to do. We're looking to have win-win solutions have to benefit everybody. If we can't say that this benefits this group and this group, we need to reassess there. And it's my entire life thing. I always talk about Eco Guy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Eco Guy. That's like
I've
my
heard,
favorite.
yeah, a little bit, not much.
It's the Japanese mindset that basically you take all the things that you take what you love and what you're good at, where you can make money at, and what you think the world needs, and you combine that all in and you make one word. And for me, it's that we need to have more, meet in the middle mindset. And there are wins to be had. And a lot of times we don't because we're so convinced that one side or the other has to win. And I fundamentally believe we can have more and in our world. And clearly, based off of our logos everywhere, I'm pretty insistent on making that happen. So yes.
Well, why is that so personal for you? What kind of made this become such a cornerstone for everything you do, from business to personal to everything else? Is there a significant moment, or
I think it's maybe the element of seeing people that got hurt because someone stepped on them to get somewhere. But I've seen it personally. I've seen it in business where greed comes in or whatever it is, and they say, I'm going to win on the back of someone else. And, I think we've seen it in our culture a lot lately. But for me personally, yeah, I saw some very, growing up, I grew up in the rural world but my dad was somebody who always, and so maybe a lot of this does go back to good parents that just taught you, like do things the right way. There does not need to be a taking advantage of. One of our core
Yeah.
values that we do not take advantage of those within our reach, and we will remove ourselves from people who do seek to take advantage of us, because there's enough of that out there. But if you can just simply say, I'm not going to be taking advantage of people, like I'm going to be here for your best interest, and you can be authentic about that, it's powerful having seen the right way. And I think that I'm blessed to have parents who did show a little bit of that in real life.
Yeah, no, for sure, and I love that core value. We have a similar one in the sense of we have 2 core values above it, which is to work with those who are passionate and to have attention to detail no matter how big or how small. And then 3 is to not work with those who don't see that as a cornerstone, and no matter how much it financially would or wouldn't benefit the company, we don't wanna kind of associate in a similar way where it's like, obviously, we don't wanna take advantage of each other, but for you, you know, did you always have core values in your business, or is this after, 2 successful exits leading into Well and Good, that it finally you're like, "Oh, man, we really do need to have." I think core values for me have been the biggest game changer for just how we do day to day.
I think you're dead on right. The core values are the biggest game changer, probably from our company's perspective. This is the one that I vocalized them the most. I think
Yeah,
we always had them in the concept and some of the philosophies and things, but we didn't say it and we didn't speak it, put it out in front of everybody the way that we are now. And I think it's because, in seeing a lot of the success that I've had prior, it was because of a personal set of core values, and so it's
yeah,
like, okay, if that's going to be the thing that's helping us as an organization, let's hope that everybody catches on to that. And let's set things that are beyond just me, but that over, that umbrella of the entire organization. And yeah, just the simple in the previous industry that I was in with the bank owned work, there was people were not getting paid constantly. Constantly was one thing. So one of our things is like, we are going to pay for the services completed. And that was regardless of whether our client paid us. So we made the decision, we made one decision, which is that we're going to pay for the services that were rightfully completed. That shifted then people started to know that they were working for a company who was going to have their back. And that value was there. I think it started to become over years. People saw that. And in this case, I'm saying, let's accelerate that a bit. Let's just speak it from the start and let's live it from the
yeah.
start. And if we have it as more than just what's on our walls, but like how we live on and operate on a daily basis, it does get accelerated, I feel like.
Yeah, and it definitely, I think, helps weed out those who you want to work with and not want to work with. I think, it's great to have it on the wall or write it on a Slack channel with your team or, agree with it within an email. But until you put it out there, you not saying that you don't attract what you already feel and preach, but once you put it out there, it really does help kind of shift through the clutter, right? I think you guys can see that probably through your clients that you work with today.
Undoubtedly, undoubtedly. It's the ultimate shield to the folks that may be not right for your organization, both whether it's on the
Yeah.
client side or if it's on the teammate side, right? It's
Yeah.
both of them. And like, we are kind of like that, a little bit more of a bold company from the servicing side, which servicing companies usually are not bold. They're usually the ones that are in the shadows. They're the quiet ones or the timid ones. They don't want to ruffle any feathers and things like that. And
Yeah.
with us, we're saying like, if we firmly believe that we are presenting win-win solution, we should be bold about that. And we should be able to say, hey, let's stand for that. And let's be okay with the fact that some people may not want that. Some people may want to be taking advantage of whether it's taking advantage of us or others. And that's their prerogative. But we have made our umbrella, our shield, whatever you want to call it. And I do believe that the more we vocalize that, the more that it really aligns us with the folks that want to be aligned. And that's been a
Yeah.
great thing.
Yeah, and this industry is no shortage of communities and connection, and it's a small world. Once you know so and so at this conference, and you meet, and now all of a sudden you have all the same people in one conference that are like having a family reunion, basically,
Yeah.
because you're like, it's such a small world. So, it's super cool, and I'm always curious. We got to talk a little bit on our pre-chat just on the stuff that you guys are doing today and the way you see the industry, and you are bold. Service companies, cleaners, maintenance staff, none of them want to ruffle feathers. They want to just do their job and be in and out without having any kind of headache or because the work is already hard. So why do they want to complicate it? That's kind of already the mentality. So walk me through some maybe kind of insight on A, your day to day, but two, how do you successfully set up systems for hosts or operators that really are trying to build something when it comes to a hospitality business? And, there's a lot to know. There's a lot of tech, there's a lot of operations, there's a lot of changes happening on the OTA side. So with you guys, when it comes into logistics and operations, what's your kind of just immediate core go to?
Yeah, I think that everybody should be focused on their primary functions. And, that's one of the biggest things you just mentioned, how managers or hosts have so much on their plate, things like tech, things like, all these different things they're going to be doing, revenue optimization, property onboards, there's all these things. And we say, okay, let us help you by having us obsess. Someone needs to be obsessing over the fact that there's a flat tire with the cleaner and you got to reroute that. And somebody's got to be like, well, wait, is that toilet paper the highest quality we can get for that price? And like all these things that are, we do preach that. So a lot of my day to day and a lot of our company is all about saying, okay, what is it that you are great at? And we want to have people be great at what they are great at. And we want to be great at what we are. And that's the same thing with our professionals internally, which is that if you are a full-time cleaning professional, you should be great at that. You have chosen that profession, lean into it. And we as a company will lean into that as well. We will not be asking you to be a full-time laundry attendant because that's a profession as well. And that has people that are really good at that. And they have leaned into that as their main primary thing. So leaning into to focus and focus through intentional that you have chosen this path. Like a host has chosen to be a host. It's not saying that they can't run a cleaning company, but it's probably not the best thing for their time and for their overall company and the thing that they've chosen to do. So focusing on focus is probably my biggest thing, is telling everybody, don't try to be everything at once. Lean into your strengths and certainly surround yourself with folks that choose to do the things that they are great at.
100%. And not to keep referencing conferences, but one of the core things that's similar to what you just said at Level Up Your Listing was, there's a lot of people that get in that realm of, well, I only have one property,
Mm.
or I'm only at 5 homes, or whatever the size or scale might be. And so many people feel like shame and kind of, it's like, no, only one property is great. It's better than having 0 properties. It's better than not starting and knowing that you're passionate about hospitality or taking care of guests and hosting and this type of industry that we're in, and not doing anything and just letting it fade away. So go ahead. Yeah.
And if you're great at something, you're going to get more of it. So, like,
Yeah.
if the reframe was, I am great at hosting one property, I think that those folks may be surprised at how quickly that turns into, I am great at doing 2 of those, properties. And the limiting beliefs of saying that volume matters and that all the growth is the real thing. It's what are you great at? Because that will always multiply. The things that you're great at will multiply. Whereas if you're looking at it from a strictly numbers perspective, that is your only barometer. And I think we should judge ourselves off of what we're great at.
For sure. It's just, and it goes back to, the housekeeping side, whether it's like, I'm just a cleaner. We
Mhm.
hear that all the time, or they're just a maintenance staff. And it's like, no, oh,
Our
take that
core
back.
values. So we have
Yeah.
8 core values. A couple of them have rotated throughout each year. So we have some that are like fundamental and ever changing, and we have a couple of rotating. Our first year, it was that we do not have a just mentality. We literally, it was our first year core value, because that's exactly what we said. Because sometimes, the just mentality can go both ways, right? So
Yeah.
the cleaner can think I'm just and so, I'm not going to be able to speak up or whatever it may be. But they can also think, to the office professional, they can say, well, you're just an office professional. You don't understand what I go through every day. And you know what? The office professional has their own sets of challenges, and there is no just on any side. Every role, every profession should be valued within the organization. And so, yeah, no just mentality.
All right, Slick Talkers. Now for another dynamic sponsored duo of the podcast. I would love to introduce you to Vintory and Safely. About Vintory, we've had Brooke Flotz on the podcast, who is a founder, multiple times, and him and his team know numbers. They know data and they know marketing. They know how to help property managers just like you scale and grow their business by adding more inventory, aka more homes, into your rental program that drive the bottom line. For all of you listeners that want to learn how to scale and grow your inventory, you can get a free digital copy of Brooke's book called From Zero to 500 Properties in 5 Years. And for an added bonus, if you would do a demo of the Vintory platform, you'll get a $50 gift card to Amazon. Now that's a sick deal. And now to touch on our friends at safely.com. Safely.com helps property managers just like you and I protecting the homes that they manage from structural damage to content damage and, of course, bodily injury. This means plates, linens, cups, couches, tables, curtains, walls, and, of course, your guests themselves are protected. And this helps you by scaling your company in order to ensure that you are retaining owners and inventory in your program. If anything is broken or if anyone is hurt, you are able to make a claim through Safely, and within 3 business days, you can get instantly paid out to replace any items and settle any claims that happen on site without having to deduct from your owner's payouts. That's why I call these guys the dynamic sponsor duo. And thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Check out their offers in the show notes, and back to the episode. Yeah. I love it. I love it. And now with all the areas and the homes and the types of hosts and companies you guys are working with, I'm always curious to hear this. When a company or an entrepreneur has such a reach and gets to see such a different spread of, operators and different markets and whatever it might be, I'm always curious, what's the inside scoop? And when I say inside scoop, what are you seeing that isn't maybe being talked about in today's, I'm as a media guy, like I would love to know, like, are we talking about topics that aren't really mattering? Is that even a word? That don't even matter? Or are there topics that haven't made out of these like legit areas or destinations that, they're suffering with X, Y, and Z, but no one's talking about it, so there's no real resource. And I would love to see from your perspective, what do you see? What's your pulse look like inside the industry as you guys are, growing and continuing to work with different operators?
I think that we are struggling a bit with being held hostage as maybe a society, but definitely within our industry, held hostage by ratings. I think that we are so enslaved to the fact that if we don't bend over backwards for our guest and give them something, they're literally holding these ransom. And it is a strange thing that really is encompassing of about 10% of guests that are simply going to hold the rating over your head in order to get what they want. And we've got to, as a society, start to, you go to the Uber driver and, if you give them a 4, it immediately says what was wrong, right? And it's like, well, it just wasn't a 5. There was nothing really that moved the needle for me about this. It was nothing bad. But a 4 is like death sometimes in our industry and in whenever algorithms are being created based off of that. And I think we've got to understand that, like, we did a survey and we asked at the folks within our world, would you trust a 5.0 or a 4.9? And most people now are starting to trust the 4.9 more because it means there's some realness to it. They didn't pay for their reviews. They didn't, not review the other person so that way it wouldn't show up in theirs. And there's all these games that we're playing with reviews. And I think it's weighing heavily on hosts because there are a lot of guests that are playing games with it. And I just think that we need to start to have more overarching getting in front of that. And I think that's something that I see bubbling under the surface that is a challenge within our industry. So that's maybe one thing. I could get into some other things. I think that people are definitely seeing that they need to level up the competition. Everybody's going to say that. There's obviously a ton more competition, but how do you level up becomes really interesting. There's everything done on purpose is always going to be a huge thing that people are realizing. Certainly themed houses or themed properties are performing a lot more so than ones that don't. And that does not mean that the theme needs to cater to a specific audience. I think that we're
Yeah.
seeing a lot more of a neutral theming, but a theme. And I think that's super smart. And, that to me is shifting where we should be, which is a very unique experience, because that's what short-term rentals are designed to be, is a unique experience, but one that can cater to potentially more audiences that, we always think of when we think of theme, immediately everybody thinks bachelorette parties, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, and that may be, the majority of the groups that are coming, but there's groups that are traveling for all different reasons. And you can lean into themes that have a lot more neutrality and still attract every type of group within that.
Well, I was gonna say, like, probably another theme is Disney or some kind of
Mhm.
like character, Star Wars, or that type of stuff. And it's like it's not every house doesn't need to be a Disney house or a Star Wars house or a Bachelorette, hub. That yeah, there's
I
plenty of
agree.
other.
I agree. And I think, that we could talk a lot about the shifts of the regulatory climate and all that. And
Yeah,
I think that what people are really finding is you have to be involved with your community. Every host should be involved in some sort of a coalition. Everybody should be looking at our industry as more of a collective rather than the individual, just us doing it our own way and our own self. This is an industry that should be united and should be united for making our communities better. Because like the fact
Yeah.
is, I don't think that shoving 20 people into a house with 2 bathrooms and 1 parking spot is a good idea. Like, and we need to be honest about that. And we need to say like, listen, some of the ways that we've done it may not be the best ways to be able to keep us to be able to do what we do. And I think the smart hosts are starting to realize that. The ones who really are taking advantage of neighborhoods and communities, we need to be unified and say like, all right, let's say regulations can be helpful in this case. And I think that's happening as well.
Yeah. Well, coming back before we get to that, because that's a whole nother can of worms that I'm ready to jump into, but it's a can for sure. Going into the theme stuff, I'm always kind of curious, being a service-based company and dealing with, cleanings and turnovers and maintenance and all this stuff. I've heard both sides, and I would love to hear your take on the service side. A lot of people say, I hate a themed home. I hate well designed with all the extra things on the walls, things on the ceilings, carpets everywhere, whatever the piece might be. But then the others will say, I love it because at the end of the day, not all of that stuff gets used. So it's actually pretty easy to clean and maneuver around. But I would love your guys' take when it comes to a themed home versus just a normal real estate kind of like showing staged home. Yeah, there's furniture, but would love your take.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that staging and designing has a lot of aspects. To me, we say this all the time. We offer customization within standardization. So I
Mm,
love customizing things. I think that leaning into an orange room or a blue room or a green room is smart. But that does not mean that you need an orange comforter or a green comforter or those things that are going to prevent optimize servicing. Like you're going to have a
yeah.
kink there at some point because of the way that you themed something. So I think that looking at the ongoing turnover process, like we say, we provide the blank canvas for the artists, which are the hosts, to paint their masterpiece. Like absolutely. So we're going to give all the white, beautiful sheets and even top sheets, all of that. But then let's do pops of color with throw blankets, and let's do that a little bit more thought through from the ongoing logistical perspective of this. So to me, from a servicing perspective, I think themes are awesome if they are thought through in terms of how is this going to look in 8 months from now, and this house gets beaten up. Is that thing going to be a constant issue of like it needs to go back here? And there's some general thoughts that I would say about especially the linens. The linens are the biggest thing. Individual different colors towels, different colored towels they're gonna end up bleeding into all of your other colors, and you're gonna have problems with that. So thinking through from the servicing side, I love the themes. And I think that we should think through them more in the terms of decorations and more in terms of accent items rather than the actual fundamental part of a linen or, the towels or things that are needing to be changed on an ongoing basis.
100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And it's just one of those things though, like when you unless you have the experience like you do, you really don't think about that stuff, right? It's oh shoot moment where you're realizing these things happen. You're like, ah, dang, I shouldn't have bought that comforter that's purple and orange and blah 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 or whatever.
And to that point, we work with a lot of great designers. And a lot of times, what's happening now, the best hosts are talking about the servicing with their designer. So they're saying, like, let's talk through this. What is the best way to do this? And we've seen some real great wins working with the designers and saying, like, yeah, what if we didn't do that on the bedspread, but we rather did that as an accent blanket? And those little shifts can be a big part of it. And I think involving, if you know who your servicer is going to be, we are starting to be a lot earlier in the process because we have a lot of folks who are like, man, I really wish I would have found Well and Good before I went out and bought all of these other things and all that. And we work to offset, and we work to most of our properties that come to us are transition properties, meaning they were an active short-term rental before we start servicing them. So we clearly have, we work towards finding solutions there. But it definitely helps when you're setting something up and you know who your servicer is going to be, including in that process of knowing what that's going to look like is a help. And I think that the designers appreciate that because they don't want their
Yeah.
work to go in vain either. Designers do a great job of setting themes and all that. And no doubt we work with some great ones. We can refer any ones that you want. They're nationwide. They're awesome. You probably know a
Yeah, I
lot.
love it. No, a couple. I know they may have been at level up your listing. No big deal.
Yeah,
Shout
you're
out
right.
to
You're right.
Very
N
nice.
Natalie and Tatiana. No, I want to go back to this regulation piece. I know it's one piece that can be a really hard topic from at least a listener standpoint. I know, podcast listeners, there can be a little bit of listener fatigue when it comes either to topics or sponsors and ads. And I try to be mindful of that. But one of the big ones in our industry, especially, is regulations. And, I'm big friends and fans of Rent Responsibly and, a
Hat
bunch
right
of
behind me.
other.
Oh, that's a
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
there
There
it
it is.
is.
But love Dave and the team and Alexa and Dana and just the work that they're doing. But when it comes to regulation, especially being new, and I know a lot of our listeners are more professional, 10 plus homes type deal, but when it comes to being new, regulations is not a thing that ever crosses your mind unless again you've had experience in some other work or industry where again you got hit with regulations and stuff like that. So, you know, when people hear it, I think this current day and age and kind of other podcasts, which we could be guilty of, are, it's, oh, okay, regulations, whatever. Yeah. So what? You can't operate your home. Great. Your home probably wasn't made to be a short term rental or stuff like that kind of is going through our head. But it doesn't just impact the host or the owner. It impacts companies like Well and Good. It impacts your teams and impacts the companies you work with. It impacts our tech providers. It impacts so many people when it comes to regulation that I want to touch on that because you did mention, regulations. And for you guys, when it comes to fair regulation and just the way we operate today, what are your thoughts? Like where's your kind of like hot take right now when it comes to regulatory, talks and conversations?
So I'm going to give this from a servicer's perspective, of course, so this is, looking at it from my vantage point, but I do think that if we were to lean into some of the real negatives of what short-term rentals have within the community, which is that it's kind of a low class, everybody coming in to party, we can list all the things, right? So from
Yeah.
a servicer's perspective, some of the things that we feel like we could help bring to the conversation is let's make sure that there is not a packing in of the home of in terms of occupancy. I think that occupancy limits are healthy. And I think that if we don't, we're going to always be stuck with having too many people in the house and the neighbors never going to be thrilled about that. So like that is something that I think is just smart to look into of, you know, does it make sense for the actual property? The other thing is are we looking at it from the health and safety perspective, the same protocol that, hotels have to go through? Scottsdale just dealt with this majorly here locally, and they put in some smart guidelines such as like, your emergency plan and things like in what is the process for cleaning the laundry, right? Like is if you're literally not having any sort of a laundering process, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of really what I think are the things that lead us to the problems. Unsanitary, not serviced professionally, just that mom and pop mindset that it's like, okay, we see that if we are not paying attention to the professionalization of our industry, then it is going to be going down to that like lowest common denominator, which is just get it done or put as many people as you want in the house or anything like that. So that's what I think are benefits to some of the possible regulations. I think there's so many ways that hosts do great jobs of assimilating themselves into the communities. We have some of our hosts that literally have to take a book, leave a book, right? The outside, the one thing that screams neighborhood more than anything is the little house that's got the books. Or hosts do it, right? And it's like it's not that Airbnb next to me. It's like, yeah, they're part of the community too. And I think that like just doing super over the top intentional stuff like that, lean into it because that does allow for it. But maybe that answers the question a little bit, maybe too much from my vantage point. But I think the other points have been said in terms of like maybe the other, that's some of the main highlights. But that's from my vantage point, the things that I see people doing that are helping contribute to the conversation to say, hey, if this is done the right way, it does produce jobs. It does produce tax revenue. Ooh, we should also be paying taxes. We should be paying taxes. We should be paying taxes. That means that the servicing company should be paying taxes, right? We should not just be paying individual cleaners under the table and making that the way of doing short-term rentals because that runs into a head, right? It's like, and so we look and say, let's be above board. We will make sure that everyone in our organization has been background checked and has a tax identification. All of those different things matter, and we work with that as closely to the ground as anyone in our organization. I'm sorry, anyone in our industry, and I think that matters. So preaching that loudly and saying, well, look, we're leaning into paying taxes. We should. Every entity that brings revenue to this extent should.
Yeah, agreed. Except for the federal government, they shouldn't get some of that. I'm just kidding.
Ooh,
Um,
we could get into that all day. I'm not. Yeah, if we're supporting the local tourism, we're
yeah,
supporting
yeah,
all that stuff. The local, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
We're in agreement. Will Slicker.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was like, I'm not gonna reveal myself too much, but I agree. I think like it's there's things where at the end of the day, it's okay to be in the gray area for some stuff, but one of the things that you shouldn't be and can't be, at least in business, is when it comes to your taxes, when it comes to your operations and your attention to detail of bigger subjects like advocacy and regulation. Like that is a thing where there is no gray area. It's black and white right now. And that's what helps move the best legislations forward for our industry, like you're talking about, like occupancy stuff. That's something you can't just be like, "Oh, yeah, whatever." Like, that actually does matter because if you give an inch, they'll take a mile, and that's when parties and bad things happen, and, companies like Minute and Safely and Proper and all these other types of company pop up because they, 1, are needed, but at the end of the day, it's gonna cause more and more, again, of those issues that are gonna make the industry look down upon by travelers and guests and neighbors and communities as a whole. So, yeah,
And it's like that's an and mentality, right? Do we need noise monitoring, insurance, et cetera, or regulations? It's both. We do need both. Like we need to have the guardrails that say, in a general sense, don't put a zillion people in the house, don't do this, don't do this. But also like if you follow those and they still are causing a big problem, then you've got your noise monitoring, you've got your insurance, you've got your different things that you cover. And I think both worlds are needed within our space. And I think that we can lean into that both sides for sure.
100%. I love it. I love that we're on the same page and, one mind over here. But I did give you a quick warning before we hit record today. And we've been doing this thing, and I'm sure all the listeners are like, okay, well, just get on with it. But like we ask every guest before the next guest to ask a question without revealing who you are. And so I got to sit down this morning on May 9th, which is when this podcast is being recorded, with Caleb Hannon, who is one of the owners of Stay Lake Norman. And so he wanted to ask a question to you without knowing you were going to be Jonathan Wicks today. He said, what is something that you went through and thought, why? Why am I going through this? But now, in hindsight, can see why and understand it. It's a
Ooh,
hard one. It's a hard one.
I'm going to. Okay. I'm going to give a personal and a professional one, maybe a little bit more zoomed out. Personal, I did not want to go to the college that I went to. I went to a college that was actually super. It was like a seminary style, and I had to basically the degree options were super limited because it was like a very Christian based. So I didn't want to go there, and I think had I gone to the place that I wanted to go, I don't think I ever would have started a company. I don't think I ever would have found my way out through entrepreneurialism versus the traditional route. And so, yeah, that would definitely be one of them where I don't think it's what I would, I wouldn't have at the time been super thrilled. I wasn't super thrilled. It was kind of doing it for the parents kind of thing, and in that sense, though, it turned out to be a great thing. I have no, I always say, if you're content with where you are, you can't be upset at the road that got you there. And, the road
Yeah.
that got me there was an interesting one, but yeah, I'm happy with that. And then I would also say, we went through initially when we first started our company, we had a lot of folks, this had not really been done in terms of the idea of a company that said, hey, we're going to have the linens be provided by our company. They're going to be great. You're going to love them. They're high end and we don't do anything low class, and we introduced this. And when we did, we had one of the initial things was we, of course, had exceptions, right? We had all these exceptions because we had to start somewhere, and so and
Yeah.
there were some points where with one relationship I remember specifically where they were just so intent on doing certain things their way, and it was that they weren't respecting really what we were bringing to the table, and that was a hard situation for us. In looking back, it was one of the best things that happened to us because we developed, our stances on things, and we were, always transparent as possible. That relationship did not last. And that was one of those like, why is this happening? But I definitely look back and I say that shaped our company. And that was a good thing for us to be able to provide the high level of service to the people that we do now, to the large numbers of people that we do now, we had to draw some lines in terms of things that we really believe in as a company. And that's
Mhm.
helped us for sure.
Yeah, if you service everybody, you're not servicing anybody, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Totally, totally. And again, customization within standardization. I love customization, but there's, if you're holding on to things for just the sake of control, in essence, that's strange. And partnerships require trust. Of course, there should be a high level of trust. And we now have earned that trust. And,
Yeah.
especially with it in that situation, we had earned that trust. And so that was a learning point. But I would say at the time, I was thinking, man, this is not what I want to be going through.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I know you and I could probably, the next time we're in person together, go through our similar Bible college seminary experiences together. Moody Bible Institute for 3 months, baby. Let's go.
Come on,
Uh,
what? I didn't know.
yeah, 3
That's
months,
crazy.
and then I didn't make it very far after that, but yeah.
I graduated from one of those places. My goodness.
Right, right? Isn't that insane? It's yeah, I would love to catch up and geek out about that with you over a beer one of these days, but
Yes.
it's a great I completely agree with you on the sense of if you're not content or if you are content with where you are today, then you have to be thankful for the road that took you there or got you there. And one of my favorite kind of exposure things to that type of mentality was watching the Tony Robbins documentary that was on Netflix a while ago, and just kind of the sense of this girl was blaming her dad for all of her issues and her anger and maybe mistrust towards men. And she, was all this. And he's like, well, you blame your dad for all this bad stuff, but what about the good stuff? And she was like, well, this and that. And then she tried to justify it for a little bit, but then he kept pulling out more good things that she did and that shaped her to the woman that she was. She's like, if you're going to blame him for the bad, blame him for the good, because that's what got you to where you are today. And it's such a great mind shift for me, at least before getting into entrepreneurship of like, all right, if I'm gonna, complain, I better at least give a compliment and a thanks to the road that led me to where obviously I am. So
No
I love that.
question. No question.
Love
Use
that.
the skills that have been given. We've all been given this unique set of skills based off our backgrounds, and we have to use it and we have to lean into whatever that is that shaped us. And the other thing is sometimes the hardest things you've gone through allow you to relate to somebody else. That's one of the biggest things that
100%.
help. And so it's like you can then say, nothing was handed to me either. We can all be leveling up in that sense. And yeah, I think it does give empathy, and I think that's important in business too.
100%. Empathy and emotional intelligence is key. Now, Jonathan, I want to ask you a question for the next guest. What do you want them to answer on their episode without knowing who they are and what their background is?
I'm going to go in a positive thing, and I would ask them to describe one moment that they've had with someone within their organization or someone they work with closely that have really been the wow, this is what I do it for moment.
Mm.
And, that the moments that make it all worth it, all the things that we go through as entrepreneurs. And I think that we sometimes don't take the time to reflect on those moments, but they exist. And like the man, I worked for that. And especially if it's a moment with a person would be what I would say. So what's a moment with someone within your organization or in any way that you felt like was that makes it worth it moment?
Yeah, and sometimes those moments aren't long. They're very short, but great.
But I think we
Yeah,
should relish in them. Yeah, we should relish in them because we know how hard it is, and so taking the time to think on that is I think healthy. So yeah, that's my question.
definitely. I love that. That's a great question. And now the final question I ask every guest, no matter what, is outside of all the links that we're going to put inside of the show notes for this episode, what's the one link that anyone listening to right now has access to? What link would that be to send them to get to know more about you or your company or anything that we've talked about today?
At wellandgood.pro, and that is on Instagram. It is the easiest thing at wellandgood.pro. It is also our website. So if you're thinking wellandgood.pro, you're going to get to our website or our Instagram handle. That will do it. And at wellandgood.pro, you can type it in on your Instagram, and you'll see a lot of our company culture through there.
I love it. I love it. So you heard it here first, Slick Talkers. Make sure you like and subscribe everything at wellandgood.pro. It'll be linked in the show notes. Give Jonathan Wicks and his team a follow, a like, and subscribe, all the above. And of course, as I always love to say, we'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.